Throughout this year, we've heard from so many wonderful guests on People, Nature, Big Ideas. We've connected with people from all places and backgrounds, and across all of their stories, one thing feels so clear to me that access to nature is essential to every single one of us. And that's why TPL is working in communities across the country to protect land and build parks, especially in communities where that work is needed the most. So this holiday season, you can be a part of this critical work. When you make a gift, you're moving us one step closer to ensuring equitable outdoor access is available to all people. And if you give by December 31st, your gift will be matched for up to $250,000. So thank you. I wish you peace. I wish you warmth. I wish you safety. And we'll see you in 2025. Welcome to People, Nature, Big Ideas. Hello there, Tom.
Hi there, Rhonda. How are you?
I'm good. I'm getting a little bit antsy because it's the end of the year and I'm like 1 week away from 2 weeks vacation. So I'm like,
you
ready to rock and roll.
Senioritis, end of the year stuff. Yeah.
Well, you know, we've reached the end of another calendar year, and this one is a special episode that we've planned, right?
Yeah. So today is going to be a 3-part episode. We're going to highlight 3 TPL projects. We're going to highlight a person, a nature-based project in our nature segment, and then at the end, one really big idea. Does that sound good to you?
It sounds great. I mean, I'm on the inside looking out, so I think it's absolutely really good. So, and this isn't any sort of ranking of projects by importance or value. There's so much to say for the work that the TPL folks are doing. They're all valuable. I am really, really proud to be a member of the TPL community. So this is simply our way of highlighting some of the work that's come to fruition, often after years and years of hard work.
Yep, that's right. So before we get into our first segment on people, any thoughts at year's end here for our listeners? You know, I asked you how you were doing. I know you're excited for vacation, but like any reflections you'd like to share with the audience? Things you're excited about maybe for 2025?
Oh wow, you're really catching me on my feet. You know, I'll share that on the one hand, I'm super grateful for this podcast. I'm grateful for all of the access I've had to some really inspiring people. And I'm not just saying that to say that.
Right.
It's there's just so many beautiful humans in this world that are doing really good work. And I feel very honored to be able to have a conversation with just a sliver of them who are out there. I think as many of us are looking forward towards this new coming, you know, calendar year 2025, there is a certain kind of energy going into it. And there's an energy around a little bit of scarcity, a little bit of fear, but at the same time, there's also a big push to stay close together. There's a big push to collaborate, to consolidate, to even celebrate where you can. And then there's also this message you've heard me say many times this year around resting. And so figuring out a way to stay in community, but also have a practice of self-care. And for many of us, that looks like rest. And that can actually be 15 minutes between meetings, you know, giving yourself a moment to sit and do a little bit of meditation, maybe do some stretching, go outside, you know, to get some fresh air, rejuvenate, drink a lot of water. We need to make sure that our systems are taken care of in such a way that we can continue to push forward with this work, but to be able to do it with joy. And so this is something that's really heavy on my mind. And so I'm really interested in seeing how we're able to cultivate conversations next year to lift that up. How are people staying in community? How are people taking care of themselves? What are people letting go of so that they can continue to do both? So I'm really curious to see what we bring forth. So many people have reached out with ideas for folks for us to talk to. And so it's just going to be kind of hard to figure out, you know, how we do it all.
Right.
But the other thing that just a closing thought, the other thing I'm really grateful for is there was a point where we did a quick analysis of our listenership And
Mm.
there was a report that came back that said we had over 2 million touches. And I'm not entirely sure how a touch is identified, but I just got stuck on the 2 million part. And so
Yeah.
I'm just gonna kind of savor that and see if we can double that in 2025, because that
4
means
million. Yeah.
that means people are feeling impacted by the great work that people are doing that we have the honor of talking to. So those are
I
some of the
love it.
things that I have.
I
What
love
about
it.
you?
Yeah, well, like you, I'm so grateful for being a part of this podcast and like you said, meeting just a sliver of the wonderful people doing amazing work. It's a privilege to be able to uplift their messages and share them with so many people. And also, I think one message I'm going into 2025 with is I think there's going to continue to need to be reimaginings in the world. We're going to have to keep doing our great work, but also imagine new possibilities to keep us excited and keep us nimble, but bring other people into. So I'm going to be looking for inspiration in 2025.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
awesome.
So let's get in. Let's hop over to part one of the podcast. I'm really excited for this. Rhonda, I hope you have a great break. Get some rest, and I will see you in the new year.
Same to you, Tommy. I really cherish this partnership and this collaboration, and shout out to the rest of the production team. People really put
Alyssa,
their,
Vanessa,
and even the
absolutely.
folks on the editorial team who have to do all
Hmm.
the things. I'm really grateful to them. So I hope everybody rests, and I'll see you all next year.
All right, onward.
Let's go. All right. Well, welcome everyone to our first segment, our people segment, where we are focusing on the folks who've made a difference in ensuring quality outdoor access and experiences are available to everyone. And today, the person we're excited to talk about is Dr. Lorena Zeller. Lorena is the former principal at Ad B. Anderson School in Philadelphia, and she's now the executive director of special education for the Office of Special Education and Diverse Learners. Welcome to the podcast, Lorena.
Thank you. So glad to be here, Rhonda. And I'm glad that I'm a part of the people segment. People make the work happen. So just honored to be here and be talking about the people and be one of the people for today.
Yeah, awesome. It's an honor. We're really glad to have you. And so we did invite you to this episode to talk about the community schoolyard at Adby Anderson School. And this was a project that you brought to fruition in 2022. And that was after years of hard work. And so, in our brief time, I'm going to ask you to share some of the project details and the wonderful elements that have brought the Anderson community to life by way of the school. And when we had our pre production meeting, it was really clear to me that you are a compelling storyteller and a human with a really big heart. And so you are welcome to sprinkle some of that loving magic with any anecdotes as we go along in this conversation. But I do want to first start by having you tell us a little bit about the Anderson community, the neighborhood, what the schoolyard used to be like, and why you felt that this schoolyard was essential for the school, for the children, and for the community
Yeah,
itself.
thank you. So Abby Anderson School is a neighborhood school. It's K through 8 in a section of Philadelphia that, depending on who you ask, and I try to honor both sides, it's in Southwest Philadelphia or West Philadelphia, depending on who you ask. And so the community is in the Cobbs Creek section part of West Philadelphia or Southwest, which is surrounded by trees and surrounded by creeks and whatnot. Has lots of historical and political connections in this neighborhood as well, and lots of generations that have been a part of story history. Cobbs Creek is also like where the move bombing happened and has impacted
Mm.
generations. So there's also like a history of trauma and distrust within that community. I became the principal in 2015 at Abby Anderson School. One of my biggest memories, I remember the first day of school and on my first year, and I walked out into the schoolyard and I saw about 550 kids and a bunch of families who did not know me and thought I was playing dress up because
Mm.
I looked so young. And I remember looking at this schoolyard with lots of families who were turning their students and their children, their most prized possessions, over to me, on the first day and they did not know who I was. I got hired quickly, so there was really no time to do like a meet and greet, meet the principal, chat and chew, whatever you may call it. But I saw an opportunity of community. And I saw an opportunity to build trust. And I saw an opportunity to now put myself in this community who, I had a decision to make whether they were going to open me up with open arms or they were going to be resistant. And so I had some choices, but I saw that when I walked out from the
What did
school
it look
into the
like?
schoolyard.
What did the schoolyard, what did you see when you saw those children? Was it
I
asphalt and chain link
I saw
fences? What was it?
concrete. I saw
Mhm.
concrete. I saw broken concrete. I saw concrete where weeds were growing in between the concrete fences, like gated fences, just like brick, brown, dark. This is an elementary school. So I think about 5-year-olds on their first day and they're experiencing
Mhm.
what they're coming into. What I tried to focus on was the people inside of that. I saw faces, I saw families, and I saw hope and I saw opportunity.
That's incredible. So how did you get started? I mean, you're out there, you see the need, you see these faces, you see these parents, you see all of this like inefficient, deficient, broken infrastructure. How did you get started?
One of my core beliefs was always like, I want to lead a school in which I feel comfortable sending my own biological child. And that was something that always grounded me. And what I knew was true is I knew that there were students that were loving. I knew that the school was being led by teachers who were caring, right? And so that made me feel comfortable, is that we were doing great work as adults to make sure that the students had the academic, social, emotional programming that they need. But also part of that, wanting a place for where I would send my own child is like the physical space and opportunities that can come within a physical space. And so there were lots of conversations, first year principal, everything's a priority, but nothing actually gets done.
Hmm.
You want to change everything, but you have to like focus. And so throughout the year, I heard lots and lots of conversations from community members about how they've always wanted a playground, how there were other opportunities, but things fell through, or they couldn't raise enough money. There were just all these false promises around having this come to life. And so I remember talking to one of my staff members who walked in South Philadelphia and came across a project that TPL was doing in another school community.
Hmm.
And he handed me a business card after his visit and it was like, you should connect with them. Like maybe this can be
Hmm.
it for Anderson. And I was like, okay, eager beaver me. I remember sending an email on a Saturday and sending that email to say, we're interested. We want to partner. What could that look like? Of course, there was processes and all that other things, but that's kind of how it started. It
Hmm.
started from people knowing that this was something that was important to me that I wanted to cultivate with the community and also be able to deliver for the community because it was grounded in like my core belief. My vision statement my first year of Anderson was that we would be an oasis, right?
Hmm.
And so that was part of this oasis that I believe that we could create both in feeling and in infrastructure. And then I got an email saying they were interested in learning more about Abby Anderson. And I remember that walkthrough at the school, and I remember sitting in the conference room and asking questions. And I remember a question was asked about, would this school be locked up on the weekends from the community? And I remember saying no. And if that's like a metric, then maybe we're not the school for you. And I remember one of my leadership team members saying, why did you say that? Like, we lost our opportunity. And I was like, I'm going to be honest. It's
Yeah.
beyond, this is not just a schoolyard for school hours. This is for the community. And the community may be students at Abby Anderson. They may not be people that attended Anderson, but they live in the community or they're visiting through and they like, oh, that's a beautiful track. Let me just go sit there. And so, yeah, I remember that.
And that feels very well aligned with your convictions and your values and your vision for an oasis. Is you you can't do this without community. So it makes sense that it worked out, even though it does take time. It makes sense that, we've maintained this connection and this relationship with you and with the school. And so we know that many generations of residents have gone to Adby Anderson, and now they have this community schoolyard that serves multiple functions for the residents as well as the students, which is amazing. I mean, that's the purpose, right? I mean, we have this vision of everybody in the United States being within a 10-minute walk of a community park, of a park of some sort. And these community schoolyards serve that purpose. So that's right. Don't lock it up on the weekends. That's right. Keep it available to everybody. And you mentioned to me when we were having our conversation a little while ago, your own personal story, and you actually touched on it at the beginning of this conversation around how you wanted to envision the experience of for your own children or your own child.
Rhonda, you're not supposed to make me cry. In this dreaming and this vision setting, and what I was always hoping for with this community schoolyard space was a space that, if I was working after hours or working on the weekend, my son could or my daughter could go outside and play, and I knew that they would be surrounded by love because the Anderson surrounding community is love, right? Grandmoms, aunties, the Poppy store, people who have been a part of this community and have ownership, right? If something doesn't look right, they report it. And I felt like I didn't just want to be the principal of the school. Like, I want to be in the community. This is my community too. And this is why I'm taking my role as a principal seriously. And so I was envisioning like my son or my daughter playing out in the schoolyard or learning how to ride their bike there, and just being a safe space where they were just surrounded by love. And, I had the opportunity to, when we did the ribbon cutting in August of 2022, I was pregnant. And my grandmother was there,
Mm,
and my dad was there. And I
mm,
have a picture with my grandmother and the superintendent. I have a
mm,
picture of my grandmother and the state representative who lives in Cobbs Creek with her mother. And I have that picture of that critical moment. And
mhm,
the community, which I felt a part of, saw my family embedded in this for me, right? Like, this is not just something I've done for my professional resume, but I want my family to be here. I want them to
mhm,
celebrate this as well. So that was in August of 2022. And then I had my child, my son, and came back from my maternity leave. And my mom, I wanted her to come and bring the baby to the school. And the first place I took my son, Lucas, was the schoolyard. And I remember
mm,
just sitting on the swing and crying because this was the moment.
mhm, mhm,
This was the moment for me. I had the moment with the community. I had the
mhm,
moment for the students, but this was the moment for me that I felt proud. I felt connected and aligned. And I know that like my son in a few years, when he's older, will be able to like, oh, mommy was a part of this. The legacy
mhm.
that now I'm a part of for my son with students who also create this. Like, it's powerful.
It's so powerful. It's so beautiful. And I think there are probably many people who are listening to this that are also getting a little teary eyed because that is that richness, that intergenerational presence, that intergenerational connection is something that I think, frankly, we're losing in some of our communities and some of our societies for various reasons. And so to know that that was alive and lived into is, it's very beautiful. So thank you so much for sharing. I think other people are smiling in their hearts too. But you started to kind of prompt me towards another question, which is maybe your son will be going to Anderson and maybe he won't, but imagine now the participatory design process. And that's the one
Mm,
that we had for the community schoolyard.
yep.
And I know that it's meaningful for them to participate. You were talking about community members and residents feeling ownership, students feeling ownership. And as we think about this project going beyond the borders of the school and reaching out into the neighborhood, can you share a little bit about what the students experience through that participatory design process?
Yeah, I think often when we think about um, serving underserved, underrepresented minority, whatever you want to call
Mm-hmm.
it, communities, we often think about what we're doing for them
Mm-hmm.
or what we're bringing to them without their voice being included. And so, we can't say this is good for the community or that every community needs to have this without saying, do you want this or no? And if you do want it,
Mm-hmm.
what does it look like? We allowed students that were in that design class to be the leaders, right?
Mm-hmm.
Third graders. Third graders to go through a process, right? Which a process included doing surveys of their classmates, of the entire school, of the entire building, staff, family, students, the larger community to figure out like what does the community want? What do they not want? Students who went out and observed at different recess periods, at different gym periods to see like, okay, where are the students doing TikTok videos? Where are they playing football? Where are they sitting and reading? Like, what does that look like within our space? They took all that information, they did a couple of interviews with folks and really said, like, based off of my learning experience, they saw other schools, based off of my learning, this is what I feel like we can do to represent the voices of the larger community. And then they presented them to the school, and then the school had to vote. Like, I remember, and once again, this was for my family. My grandmother came. My
Mm-hmm.
cousin came that day when they did their presentation. I invited some of my friends to come. Like, this is our space,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think about how powerful that is, not just because it built some soft skills, right, around public speaking and reflecting and working in teams. But I think about the power of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we often say like representation matters and you can't dream it, you can achieve it. Like we say all these things, but you know, I looked at my students and I saw future architects.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I looked at my students and I saw future project managers
Yeah.
because of some of the skills that they were able to cultivate. And
Mm-hmm.
so those third graders were eighth graders when the project was completed. And
Mm-hmm.
so how powerful it is for their final year in their elementary experience to say it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
to feel like they have not just completed their elementary middle school experience, but they have finalized their time through giving me a gift to the
Yeah.
community.
Takeaways from this project that you could use to provide some recommendations for them. Any lessons that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I think make your petitions known
Mm.
and make it known to your community because you will find allyship and community and someone who maybe also had that silent petition join forces with you to make something happen.
Mm.
It doesn't just have to be a dream. And then finally, I guess just a reminder that children are so powerful and so resilient. And when given opportunities to shine and trusted to shine, they will.
Yeah, I like that. There's a saying somewhere. It might be a religious text or something about and a child shall lead them, something
Yeah.
along those lines. And I
Yeah.
think they're always a reminder to tap in to our own inner child. Thank you so much, Lorena.
Thank
It's
you.
been a
I
pleasure to
appreciate it.
talk to you. I know that everybody's going to be so thrilled to just hear what you have to share. And I hope that you have an incredibly beautiful holiday season.
Thank you so much, Rhonda. And, thanks again to the Trust for Public Land. And I want to personally shout out Owen Franklin. He saw me through this journey and banded with me together.
Joining us for our second segment, this is the segment on nature. And so I'm delighted to be joined by TPL's Minnesota Land Protection Director, Bob McGilvery. Welcome to People, Nature, Big Ideas, Bob.
Good afternoon, Rhonda.
Super glad you're here. You are joining us from the Minnesota Northwoods office, and we've asked you to come here today to talk about the Keystone Woods. And for those folks who aren't familiar with the Keystone Woods, it's an extraordinary project. It happens to be one of the largest swaths of undeveloped natural areas in the Twin City metro area of Minnesota. And so, Bob, for folks who aren't familiar, can you start by painting us a picture? Give us a sense of what Keystone Woods looks like, what it feels like, what makes it so special, especially given how large it is.
Yeah. First of all, if you can just imagine grasslands of rolling hills, as far as you can see, it's protected. It's part of this WMA. And there's also woodlands, several blocks of them, several entire lakes. So it's really a large piece. It really feels like you're out in the wilderness, but you're only half an hour from downtown St. Paul. And there's a variety of wildlife that call this home. There's a lot of deer and turkeys. I regularly see swans, bald eagles, harriers. I heard some people talking the other day that they saw a large group of short-eared owls, which they hadn't seen a
Mm.
group of them before. So it's also a great place for bird watching. But people hike there, people can hunt there, they can fish there. There's a variety of things to do at this place.
That's pretty exciting. When I was in Northwoods, I saw some grouse and some woodcock. Can we say that those are there too?
Well, there certainly aren't very many grouse. There are some pheasants, but grouse tend to be more in our northern part of the state.
Okay.
So not so many. Woodcock will come through when they're migrating, but not a lot of resident woodcock. So
Okay.
the species that are hunted most are deer and turkey, I would say, with some pheasant hunting as well.
So, thinking about the history, can you tell me and the audience a little bit more about how Keystone Woods even came about?
Sure. The land was owned by the Kelly Land and Cattle Company, and that family had owned the land for multiple generations. And going back over 30 years, this land has been a priority for people in the conservation community just because of its great habitat and its location and the fact that it was such a big block of undeveloped land. It was a portion of it was in the master plan for a park that's called Big Marine Park Reserve. And actually, part of the land that was owned by the Kelly family will become part of that park. The piece that we purchased is now a wildlife management area. I began talking to the family over a decade ago, and we had quite a number of conversations over the years. And finally, a couple of years ago, the stars aligned, if you will, and they were ready to sell, and we were able to agree on terms. And then we pursued funding for this and were able to acquire it a little over a year ago, and then recently transfer it to the Minnesota Department of Natural Resources.
That's really great. And so is it because of the size of this land and the fact that it was undeveloped and the fact that it was so close to the Twin Cities? Was that the reason why it was a priority for TPL? I mean, when we think about where we put a lot of our energies and attention, this place is twice the size of New York City's Central Parks. That's pretty significant.
It was a priority for a number of reasons. First of all, the natural resources there. This, as I mentioned, has a diverse variety of habitats, provides a home for multiple species of wildlife. It has high biodiversity significance. It creates a corridor from Big Marine Park Reserve out to the St. Croix River, which is a national wild and scenic river. It protects water quality because all of the water drains through this land going to the St. Croix. So the natural resources there were certainly a priority. But what really made it sing for TPL was the fact that it is so close to the Twin Cities that so many people would be able to enjoy it. People who were new to wildlife management areas could easily access this as well. Most of the WMAs, are several hours away and may be hard to get to for people who, aren't used to going to them or have limited transportation opportunities. we viewed this as a real way to introduce more people to wildlife management areas and connect more people to nature, which is one of the main things that we're trying to do at TPL, is connect everybody to the outdoors.
100%. That is our mission. And so WMA, that's Wildlife Management Area. These are public spaces. Anyone can go there. What's the difference between a WMA and any other public space?
WMAs are managed by the Minnesota DNR primarily for habitat and public recreation, primarily consisting of hunting, fishing, hiking, wildlife observation. So these areas don't have ballparks. They don't have pavilions and picnic tables, generally, that type of thing. They're more natural and designed for just nature observation and enjoyment.
That's awesome. And so none of these things come for free. And so would love to talk a little bit about how the project was funded. My understanding there was a lot of community support, but I don't put my money behind everything that I'm in favor of. So can you tell us how this project came to be funding wise?
Sure. The funding for this project came from the Outdoor Heritage Fund, which is a fund that we have in Minnesota that is dedicated sales tax funding. It's one of the four so-called legacy funds that were created by a 2008 voter referendum, and that's something that TPL helped lead. So we're blessed in Minnesota to have this large funding source to do things like this. But TPL had to splice together 6 appropriations, 6 different funding tranches to be able to make this happen. We also intend to continue to work on this project. Although it's in very good shape, there are some things that can be done to improve the habitat. We will restore some of the grasslands to native prairie. There are some invasive species in some of the woodlands like buckthorn that we're in the process of moving. So we envision that we will continue to work on this for the next 5 years or more, and we'll also receive funding from the Outdoor Heritage Fund to be able to do that work.
That's awesome. Do you have any big takeaways about this whole effort and then how we can think about the future? Maybe there's some lessons learned that you didn't anticipate. Maybe there's some key things that absolutely have to happen.
Well, I guess I would say, don't be afraid to dream big and to keep pursuing things, even if you don't succeed at first, because this took a long time. It was a big effort. And at times I didn't think it was going to happen, but ultimately we were able to pull it all together. And it's something that when I go out there now, just really makes me feel good.
I love it. I love it. There's been a long conversation that's been emerging around taking time, the importance of time. And none of these things happen overnight, no matter how hard we wish for them. So I appreciate that you all had the diligence to keep pursuing. Nevertheless, you persisted. So we got to start wrapping up. And before we go, I do want to ask you a little bit about you. Tell the audience your last really memorable experience in the outdoors. And this can be something super, super epic like Mount Everest, or it can be something as soothing as watching the leaves fall, which I think happened earlier in Minnesota than any
I
other
can
place
assure
in
you
the
they're pretty well
country.
gone now. We're about to enter our
I,
big deep freeze, first one of the year. So
oh man. When was the last time you were really moved by nature? What was something that was so memorable that,
actually, as I mentioned, I was out at Keystone last week, and just
mm-hmm.
everything that I saw out there was really amazing. I saw swans, I saw geese, I saw harriers flying around, I saw bald eagles, I saw deer tracks all over the place. And I saw all these people being able to enjoy all of that. And it really moved me to be able to see that all come together and so many other people being able to enjoy it as well.
And it probably made you really proud to be a member of the TPL family.
It certainly did.
I love it. Well, thanks for joining me, Bob. It was really nice to talk to you. I'm happy to continue to learn through you, with you, by your side. Looking forward to learning more about Keystone Woods and how it progresses over time. It sounds like it's in really good shape. I want to wish you the best of luck as you're moving forward with all this good work, and I hope that you really enjoy the holidays.
Happy holidays to you as well.
Welcome, everyone, to the third and final segment of this podcast episode where we're going to talk about a big idea. And as a quick recap, we kicked off this particular People, Nature, Big Ideas episode with Dr. Lorena Zeller from Philadelphia, and her initiative helped transform a schoolyard into a vital refuge for community and the people, the residents of that area. And then we had a piece on nature, and that's where we met Bob McGilvray from TPL's Minnesota Northwoods team, and he told us about the Keystone Woods, which is a wildlife management area that is twice the size of Central Park, and it's located just outside the Twin Cities. And now in Act 3, our big idea, we're going to shed light on the San Geronimo Commons. It's a story of how a golf course in a wildfire-prone California area was rewilded to become a resource for public good. And so joining us today to tell us all about it, we have Marin County Fire Chief Jason Weber.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So before we dive into the project to rewild a former golf course into what it is today, I want to start by talking about an image that really sticks with me. When I first read about this project, I noticed that your fire station had taken over an old golf course clubhouse. And to me, it seems like a remarkable metaphor for how our world has changed from a clubhouse geared towards privilege and leisure and relaxation to now a firehouse that's focused on preventing some of the emerging devastating wildfires in California. And I don't think we're going to see those going anywhere, sadly. Do you see that metaphor? Do you see this kind of interesting juxtaposition of what was in the space of leadership in the space of leisure that is now a place of response and repair?
Yeah, I mean, I think to your point, it's, the West is in crisis related to devastating wildfires. And it's not just California, it's really all of the Mediterranean climate and even beyond. And this, does refocus us in a lot of ways, prioritizing wildfire protection, over other things that maybe we enjoyed for leisure and now becomes paramount in our survival.
Yeah. I've been thinking about the Titanic a lot lately, but that's for another conversation. It's been coming up a lot. So one of the things that I'm asking each of our guests for this particular episode is to paint us a picture of the project, and particularly in the context of transformation.
Sure, absolutely. So this is a 157-acre property in a really pristine and wonderful watershed called the San Geronimo Valley. It's immediately adjacent to three other nature preserves. So really provided connectivity to some pretty amazing outdoor spaces, all that serve a purpose for passive recreation and natural resource management. The property itself is really three principal parcels, two what we're referring to as the meadow parcels. One of those adjacent to and runs through the Lagunitas Creek watershed, which is host to endangered coho salmon. And Trout Unlimited is doing an extensive restoration project to bring that watershed back to a more natural state. The other parcel is adjacent to Roy's Redwoods, an old redwood grove with old growth redwood. Try to say that twice. And again, another just super critical watershed area that feeds the Lagunitas Creek. And then a third parcel is where the clubhouse was, highly disturbed, big parking lot. That's going to be the future home of the Marin County Fire Department headquarters. We're currently using the clubhouse to house our fire crews. As we talked about, our programs are growing, busting at the seam. So it really is a win-win-win, both from a public safety perspective, but also the ability to rewild. And what we mean by rewilding is, like most golf courses, it was irrigated, non-native grasses. The intent is through restoration projects over time bring that back to a more natural state with native grasses, native vegetation. Returning things to a more native state is typically in this Mediterranean climate in California beneficial from a fire protection standpoint as well, because a lot of the issues we have from a fire risk are associated with non-native plant species that are highly pyrophytic, like eucalyptus and other items. And as that golf course has changed into a more natural landscape, it's something different. It's a different level of beauty, but not everybody shares the same opinion of what beautiful looks like. And I think that's, as we get further into this discussion, that'll play out.
Yeah, it is in the eye of the beholder, isn't it? And it's kind of interesting how we need to kind of transform the kind of values or the ideals that we hold in our mind and allow ourselves to kind of morph our thinking and kind of release a little bit, of what might be traditional or what might actually be utopian in some instances. And so when you were talking about the landscape and talking about the golf course, traditionally very well irrigated, it's lush and it's green, and the low level of grass and the constant watering, all of those things would presume that it's fire resistant. But now that that's changed, we'd love to hear you talk about the challenges of when it came down to making the decision to rewild this space, particularly in the name of fire mitigation.
Yeah, so I mean, no one can argue that irrigated green grass is certainly less flammable than natural vegetation that dries out. But I think what's important to realize in California, especially, is we removed natural fire from the landscape, and from an ecological perspective, fire belongs on the landscape. It's been here a lot longer than any of us, and it did a very natural job of fire fuel reduction and really creating healthier forests. In the early 1900s, there was an 11 o'clock rule, and came out of kind of the Smokey the Bear and everything. And it meant full fire suppression. And essentially, if a fire started at Tuesday afternoon, by Wednesday morning at 11 a.m., it was supposed to be fully suppressed. And that, with Smokey the Bear theme and the addition of fire agencies, we removed fire from the landscape, and we're paying for that now, almost 100 years later. So when we talk about the transition of this golf course in particular back to a more natural state, from a management perspective, we're going to have to use things like low intensity fire and other management tools in order to bring it to a healthy state. And I think we talked a little bit about how do you do this well and together. And typically fire professionals are not ecologists and biologists, and we need to partner and understand each other to have positive results. And I think we have some examples of that, and a lot of it has to do with educating the public too on what that looks like and how it's beneficial.
And along this journey, you've had some new learnings that you've had to take on, and that comes by way of collaboration. But before we get into that, because I want to hear about that's something that's very inspiring to me personally, as somebody who works in a very complex, highly matrixed organization with a whole lot of areas of expertise that cross over. You touched a little bit on working with TPL and how the land was acquired. Can you share a little bit about that story? How did that even come into being? And I think it's pretty unique.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, anybody knows the real estate market in California. It can be a challenging one. And if you understand government, we don't move at lightning speed. So the partnership with TPL allowed the acquisition of the property and then allow permanent and public access, not only for passive recreation, but the property itself is in 3 different parcels, if you will. What we're referring to as the meadow parcels have considerable deed restrictions on them for really environmental purposes. And then the clubhouse parcel, which is where we're going to put the new fire headquarters and currently using the clubhouse building. And so, it kind of provided a lot of different benefit, both from a public safety perspective and service to the community, but also from an environmental perspective and public access. So it really was a pretty big piece of legacy work for those involved. And I think, will ultimately serve both the county and the residents of that area really well.
Hmm. So you're talking about all of the different community groups and the coalitions trying to achieve their goals, and that's awesome. And that's pretty ideal. That's what we ultimately want everywhere. And people need to find ways to collaborate and get their needs met in the communities, but it can also be super challenging when we're trying to achieve those outcomes. So, what has been your experience when you're managing so many stakeholders in order to achieve such a great outcome? Some of the takeaways, and I guess this is kind of a lead-in question, because when we spoke before, you said something that was really important to me, and that is about the time and the importance of personal dispositions and kind of our personal agendas that we might have when we walk into a space. Can you tell a little bit about that process?
Yeah, I think I referenced egos, and I think everyone to a certain extent carries some ego with them, but the ability to set that aside and listen to people. And I think in a country that is so divided, these fundamental skills of being able to stop, understand a different perspective, learn from someone, even if you don't agree with them, really allows and fosters for the best outcomes. And, the fire service has a lot of big egos. And, our position is really public protection, and it's life, property, and the environment in that order. Sometimes I think we get so hung up on not budging from our position that we're not listening to different perspectives. And, I'll give you an example is our Parks and Open Space Department. When I first took the fire chief job, the Board of Supervisors who appointed me said, we need you to work on the relationship with Parks and Open Space. It's fractured, and it needs to be more collaborative. And that I was tasked with that, and really was trying to understand what's happening. Well, what was happening was we as a fire service were going out and saying, we need to cut all of this back, or we need to, remove all of this vegetation. And we weren't listening to our partners that, were extremely knowledgeable in natural resource management, ecological preservation. And through a series of tense meetings at times, we really came to understand each other's perspectives better and started to look at the landscape as, an opportunity for both of us. And how can we achieve wildland fire protection at the same time, using ecologically sound practices? And what we found was, and I would say almost without exception, is that when you start to remove non-natives and create a more natural environment, which was certainly our Parks and Open Spaces desire, you create a more resilient and safer landscape from a fire protection point. And instead of fighting with each other, and us as fire professionals coming to the table and telling our colleagues who are biologists, ecologists, experts in natural resource management, let's tell them this is an area of concern for us. Let's work on a prescription to address the concern. Fast forward to today, we now have dedicated park staff, ecologists that are out working with our fire crews, teaching them in the field best practices, educating them on plant species, even, animal species that are in sensitive habitats. The end result is we're getting more and better work done than we were butting heads with each other over, and when it boils down to it, it's egos, and setting those aside. And I think it's maturity. I probably at some point in my career, admittedly, probably didn't come to the table with an open mind. And I think as you get a little grayer or hair like I have, and you mature, you realize that, you can get more done working together. And that doesn't mean we always agree.
Mm-hmm.
It means we respect and understand each other. And I think when you look at the acquisition of this golf course, the transition to a natural landscape, the use of the clubhouse parcel for a fire headquarters, not everyone was in agreement. And, there was litigation, there was a ballot measure, there were challenges. But I think at the end of the day, the vast majority of the community, certainly the local community, supports this transition and recognizes the public benefit that it offers today, but into the future. I think it's, again, going back, closing out, let those egos go and start to work together, and we can learn.
I just want to rewind and play it again and again and again. I think that is like the theme for the nation in 2025 moving forward. Every organization, family, friendships. That is, I mean, that somebody said that the ego is where your soul goes to die. And that really resonates with me. So I think that that's kind of part of my big idea and my mantra myself in 2025. So thank you for that. That's definitely a true measure of success and definitely an approach. So we need to start wrapping up because I know this was intended to be a brief discussion, but there's so much to say. So I want to turn it back to you on a personal level. And I want to ask you about the last time you had a memorable experience in the outdoors of any sort.
Yeah, I'm quite fortunate that we live in a beautiful place, and probably unlike a lot of the country, our winters are pretty mild, so we're able to get out. But I think often I take for granted how lucky I am, and it's the little moments when I have 4 younger kids, and when you're out there away from things commercialized, entertainment, you really do get to connect with your kids, the environment, your family. And, I think those are memories I still hold near and dear, and try to get the kids off of a device or outside. And I think, that's when we find the most enjoyment. And, even taking the kids out to let them ride their bikes on the trails through the property at San Geronimo is an opportunity to see, fish that are spawning, in a natural landscape, and how truly beautiful that is. And, we had the opportunity to walk through the property with our local tribe. And, it's fascinating to hear the history, certainly before development and all of us being here, how important this landscape was to Native people, and then really trying to reflect and make sure we carry on that tradition, respectful of that past and that history and those that came before us. So those are some of my fondest memories. And I think that, the great outdoors, we need to make sure we keep this going, and for generations to come get to experience those same things.
Amen. Hallelujah. 100%. I just want to thank you so much, Fire Chief Jason Weber of Marin County. It's been an honor to talk to you. I have a feeling I'm going to circle back and have a longer conversation with you. I'm really eager to come out and have the San Geronimo experience. But before we go, I want to remind folks that this is the holiday season and you all can be part of this critical work. And so if you're able to make a gift, you can move TPL one step closer to ensuring equitable outdoor access for all people. And if you're able to contribute before the year ends on December 31st, your gift will be matched up to $250,000. People, Nature, Big Ideas is produced by the Trust for Public Land in partnership with Pretty Good Productions. Our executive producer is Thomas Clayton Miller. Our producer is Vanessa Martin, and our associate producer is Alyssa Morley. Our theme song was produced by Tall Black Guy Productions. And if you like the show, please leave us a rating on iTunes and maybe mention us to a friend or two. All right, everybody, have a happy holiday season. Be safe, get outside, and love one another, and let your egos rest.
Thank you, guys.